our conversation, how to unblock food exports from Ukraine, current actions and plans. But I would like to say something before these welcoming words. And this something is that the SADF is fully committed to the support of the Ukrainian people to this absolutely unjustified, incomprehensible aggression that it has been a victim. And secondly, I would like to say that I was very, very much impressed when I let the Ukrainian mission know that there was some anguish between African and Asian countries on the food crisis, and immediately a country that is in war, that is actually fighting for its existence, it immediately took the issue at heart as its own issue. The issue of food security for the whole world is something that was immediately taken as a major concern. This is really an outstanding attitude that I think characterizes very well the Ukrainian attitude in this war that is fighting this unjust war that it is forced to fight against this ruthless invasion made by Russia. Unfortunately, Ambassador Chentsov cannot come a last-minute commitment regarding exactly a very important issue of connected with the crimes against humanity that are being investigated Ukraine in the context of having with us
Bien, vous allez à l'avance en même temps avec
Mr. Sherhii Tereshko. We are very pleased to have you here. He is going to present the event at large, and then I will be making the moderation. Just some technical remarks. The event will be recorded, and there will be a question and answer period at the end of it. So, without any further remark, please.
Sorry for technical challenge. Dear colleague, good morning. On behalf of Ambassador Chentsov, who, yes, indeed, urgently had to switch to another event related again to the Russian war against Ukraine, I would like to thank all of you who joined for today's events, and for your support and I hope trust in Ukraine. And also, I thank you so much to our distinguished speakers who are here today despite so busy agenda, both on Ukrainian side of Ukrainian government and on the side of the European Commission. When And definitely, I would like to express our gratitude to South Asia Democratic Forum. So when they initiated the event to discuss the challenges to the global food security, we immediately expressed our interest to collaborate in this regard, because indeed Russia is waging its war not only against Ukraine in terms of military aggression, but also Russia is waging food war globally, not only against Ukraine, but also in every corner of the world, whether it is Asia, Africa, or any other continent. That is why, as was said, being responsible, the defender not only of the European values and European democracy, which we are fighting for on the battlefields in Ukraine now. Ukraine is also remaining trustful trade and food supplier player on the global market. That is why we are here today to share with you our understanding, our signals of the Ukraine's potential to remain strongly present on the global food markets, to ensure first a global food security, and to explain you what you are doing for this purpose, both on Ukrainian side and jointly with the European Commission. Before the Russian aggression, Ukraine supplied agricultural products across the globe, especially to Asian and African countries. Ukraine was among the top 5 world food exporters, and in some products in top 3. And prior to the Russian full-scale invasion to the Ukrainian land, Ukraine has planned to provide food for 1 billion people to the planet. So you can imagine how multidimensional this threat is now when Russia is undermining food supplies from Ukraine, destroying supply chains. It creates not only instability in the region, it also triggers hunger, irregular migration flows, and in fact even as we see some reports, even threat of some strengthening the extremist movements in some global region. That is why we strongly involved Ukraine, with support of the European Commission, into this resolution of the existing problem, which first of all linked to the blockade of the Ukrainian sea and seaports, which shredded global chains of food supply, and it is the sole reason for the growing food insecurity. That is why, together with the European Commission, we started to working out on alternative routes of supply from Ukraine to the EU and global markets, foremost grain. We welcomed and actively engaged into the European Commission's initiative Solidarity Lanes. And within these initiatives, we are working towards increasing capacity of our land border transit of agricultural products, and as well using all the opportunities of the Danube River to export our grain globally. On its side, Ukraine is also doing its utmost, and despite the war, ensured up to 80%, I believe, of the sowing area being sown compared to the last year. So despite all the threats of warfare, despite permanent shellings and bombing by the Russian aircraft and rockets and missiles, Ukrainian farmers are doing their great and brave job to ensure sowing campaign, which was successfully conducted, and now we are approaching, it has already started the harvesting. And this I believe should both encourage global markets, our classical traditional importers of Ukrainian agricultural products in Asia and Africa and Europe as well, that Ukraine will remain important supplier of of the agricultural products, but at the same time, we believe this resoluteness and strong approach of Ukraine to support global food security will ensure respective solidarity with Ukraine in the regions of Asia, Africa, and other regions. So we also need your solidarity in terms of countering Russian aggression, countering Russian disinformation, and countering Russia also economic crime, which are also related to the large extent to the grain. As you perfectly know, Russia not only destroying our agriculture, attempts to destroy, but also looting Ukrainian grain and illegally withdraw it from Ukrainian storages, from the Ukrainian occupied territory, and trying to sell it across the world. So we call on our international partners in various regions just to be very cautious, very attentive to any interactions with Russian carriers of grains, because to the large extent this grain might be stolen from Ukraine. And just to conclude, our also appreciation to the tremendous and great job by the European Commission, who daily work closely with EU member states, with bordering EU member states, with EU business and operators to ensure proper logistic, to ensure new logistic, allowing Ukrainian food export to be delivered globally. I would stop here because we'll have a very professional, very engaged into the topic speakers and experts. And I would like to thank you for your attention and wish all of us excellent discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sherhii Tereshko. I think the issue is very well presented on its global features. We are witnessing a war that is a war against Ukraine, but it is also a war that wants to terrorize the whole world into not showing solidarity with Ukraine. And Ukraine is showing a resilience spirit as well in this area that is absolutely remarkable. We have a panel of high distinguished speakers. We will start by two speakers in Ukraine, and then we will have two speakers here in Brussels. This is an event that is an hybrid event. We have several people here in the room. We have people coming online. Our first guest is Mr. Markian Dmytrasevych. He is the Deputy Minister of Agrarian Policy and Food in Ukraine. Please, Mr. Dmytrasevych, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the floor. So, dear distinguished participants, first of all, I want to thank you for the support that our partners provide to Ukraine, in particular European Union. And I want to provide you a quick, brief overview of the current situation in agricultural sphere in Ukraine. As all of us are aware, constant attacks of the Russian army on Ukrainian infrastructure and the blockade of seaports have already caused a global food crisis. Low exports from Ukraine, rising prices and inflation have already made basic food less accessible. About exports, we have managed to export only 5.2 million tons of agricultural products over the period of 4 months after the war had started. In comparison, you will see the difference. The export through our seaports had been around 5 to 6 million tons per month before 24th of February. 18 million tons of grain crops from the last year harvest are still waiting to be exported. This includes 12 million tons of corn and 6 million tons of wheat. Despite the war, despite of all circumstances of this war, our farmers have completed a spring sowing campaign and have already started harvesting winter crops. We already harvested about 1.8 million tons of wheat and 1.6 million tons of barley. We estimate that this year harvest may reach 60 million tons. 40 million tons of it will need to be exported. However, due to the destruction of storage infrastructure and temporary occupation of some other areas, our remaining capacity of grain storage facilities is only 60 million tons compared to 75 million tons that we had before the war. Given the remaining stocks and new crop, by the end of October, the shortage of grain storage capacity will reach 15 million tons. So due to this problem of export capacity, now we have the problem of storage capacity at the moment. Due to the above-mentioned problems, we estimate that the planted area under winter crops for next year harvesting campaign will be reduced by 30 to 60% this year. In the current conditions, when our farmers cannot sell their products and as a result will not have the working capital while facing high prices for food, fertilizers and logistics, it will make no sense for them to work on new crops. The inability to export last year's and this year's crops and reduce amount of winter crops will lead to further prices increase, and as a result it will significantly undermine the world security, and the negative impact will be felt around the world for years. In particular, internal conflicts and the new wave of migration are also unfortunately possible. We understand that it's unlikely that this war will be stopped in the short term, so we would have to rely on ourselves. And with your support and support of European Commission, we have already achieved some results. In comparison with export of 200,000 tons in March, we exported more than 2.16 million tons in June. But we understand that it's not sufficient because I already mentioned before 24th of February, we exported about 5 to 6 million tons per month. That's why we are constantly looking for opportunities to improve the situation with our exports. And at the beginning of September, we plan to organize a conference with the participation of agriculture and infrastructure ministers of partner states. We want European Commission to be involved in this conference. We are already negotiating with the European Commission. We expect the concrete projects that will significantly increase the export capabilities will be presented in this conference. The situation in Ukraine is really complicated, but like every challenging situation, it opens up new opportunities. In particular, the current challenging situation with the export of agricultural products also gave a new impulse for the development of logistics in the agricultural sector, not only in Ukraine, but also in the European countries. Speaking about this project that should be presented in the conference in the beginning of September, we have some priority projects. First of all, it's assembly of new transport vehicles for the shipments of Ukrainian agriculture products from the border of Ukraine to European seaports. What we can see now, as of today, there is a critical shortage of trucks and grain wagons. I think all the participants are aware of this situation. When we can feel the deficit of railway wagons from the side of the European Union, because we cannot transport our grain and other foodstuff to European seaports because of different standards of our railways. So the investment of European companies into the production and operation of these transport vehicles opens up a huge transportation market. We understand that it's also commercially interesting for European companies. We also want to present on this conference at the beginning of September a project of construction of cross-border transshipment terminals for grain crops and vegetable oils. The main idea of this terminals is to allow products crossing the border through grain conveyors as it works, for example, in grain sea terminals or grain elevators, and for vegetable oils with a pipeline. This will make for us possibility to increase export capacity, because you don't need to cross border with a truck driver or a railway wagon. We also will present the project for establishment of the international fund to purchase agricultural products from Ukraine farmers for the purpose of further exports. It's assumed that the participants of the fund will be government organizations and large international companies. The purchase of 20 million tons of products at the domestic Ukrainian prices will make this project attractive for investors, and it will allow Ukrainian farmers to obtain the necessary operating capital for the planting and harvesting campaign of 2022-23 seasons. We at the moment did a lot of work. We see the results. As I mentioned, in March we had only 200,000 tons of exports. In June we had 2.16 million tons of export. But we understand that our aim is at least 3.5 million tons of export per month. I also want once again to thank for the support that is provided to Ukraine, and I want to thank European Commission for tight cooperation in these logistics issues, and I'm ready to answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dmytrasevych. I think that we have to give a big congratulations to the Ukrainian farmers that are continuing their activity in spite of all the aggression that they are suffering. And congratulations to you and to the ministry for all the ideas, for all the projects that you are sponsoring, and I hope they will be looked at very carefully by all the relevant Western actors. Thank you so much for your contribution and for your updating on the situation. It was very, very important, I think, much more elaborate than whatever I could read in the press. And now we will have Mr. Taras Kachaka. He is the Deputy Minister of Economy of Ukraine, the trade representative of Ukraine, and he will will complement the state of play and will inform us on the situation from a global trade point of view. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Paolo. I really admire the courage of our agriculture in supply of grain. Indeed, I share this view, share your views as well. But at the same time, I think that we need to start this discussion that the situation we have now creates problems on both sides, so that this is extremely high prices for consumers, but as well extremely low prices for our farmers. Unfortunately, for the moment, our farmers receive around 1/3 of the price that are paid by final consumers, and this is ridiculously low. And unfortunately, the bottleneck on export will lead to suffer of small farmers, and it will be a really big challenge for us. And I think that from what we need to highlight is that in comparison with other commodities like oil or steel, agriculture is really decentralized. This trade in commodities is trade that involves thousands and thousands of people. So starting from small farmer through all the transport operators, and as well decentralized suppliers of food to final consumers. And what we see now is, from political point of view, is that the creation of bottlenecks for food might be an intentional policy or politics of Russian Federation on ensuring that government or someone who has authority controls all the flow. And this is the key difference between the, let's say, civilized world and those who want to weaponize trade in grain, so that the government can push the button and just close or open trade for particular commodities. And we need to say that the situation we have is even more complex, because if on the, let's say, most visible part of this problem, we see Russia with its, let's say, hunger politics, with creation of dependencies, and we already see how these dependencies are becoming visible. So, for example, we have this famous idea of having direct contacts with Putin on purchasing fertilizers that is pursued by Brazilian president. So he wants to care about Brazilian farmers, but he wants to play this game that actually started by Putin. The same is with grain. What we see now is that the initiatives and the negotiations that Russia is trying to organize with in different formats, like either with Turkey or with Indonesia or Brazil, it is about some kind of high-level political deals. Of course, we will use them as a tool for ensuring, for increasing the capacity of export. But the tendency is really dangerous. What we need to do is to ensure that the supply of food globally, so not only from Ukraine or Black Sea, globally, is decentralized as much as possible, because it influences the whole societies. If trade will be totally controlled by government, it will be very bad for international relations, because it will create this clientele dependency, so almost colonialism between exporting states and importing states. And as well, it will also destroy democracies, because small farmers, the thousands of people involved in producing of agricultural food will be under total control of government or those who control the transportations, the logistics. And this is the essence of the problem from, let's say, from point of view of the general function of the system. Ukraine is really successful as an open market-oriented exporter, so that we have a lot of producers, we have dozens of traders of different scale, international, domestics, and that's why for us it is important to come back as soon as possible to normal trade, to the trade that involves everyone, that provides opportunities for many people, and several other remarks on this. So that's why I think that this is so that now we see that the problem with supply of food is will last for several years, because we see that even if talks brokered by the United Nations will succeed, then it does not mean automatically that we restore all our capacity on supply of restore our capacity on export grain products. First of all, now the talks are covering only three ports, ports near Odessa. So that the fourth biggest port, which is one of most important for cereals, Mykolaiv, is not involved in these talks, and that's why these three ports, but even if they will work for full capacity, will not be able to satisfy the demand for this logistics. Then there is an issue of security of these seaports. You see that Odessa is still under shellings so quite often under shellings, and the security of seaport exists. Then there is an issue of shipping industry. So to what extent shipping industry will use the opportunities that will be created by any security deal, so that this is the cost of insurance, or even the mere decision to send ships to Ukrainian seaports is still not very clear. So whether all shipping industry will use this opportunity, and there might be some concerns about the transparency, about the abuse of the situation by those who will use these schemes of operation. So that's why, in any case, we need to invest into solidarity lanes together with the European Union on using land borders, using current opportunities, because we need to have this diversification. We need to ensure that everything operates in proper manner and not dependent on particular security deal brokered by the United Nations. And just to conclude my remarks, I think that you see that we witness very, let's say, systemic and complex political crisis in Sri Lanka, which is caused by the bad decisions in agricultural area. And I think that this is like a very big news or big illustration of this food instability. And it seems that what we are talking about in Black Sea is not only a trade, it's not only an export, this is a direct link to political stability and normal operation and normal governance of states, especially in Southeast Asia. And as well, we need to understand that the problem is more complex, the very technical conclusion that the problem is more complex than just wheat. So it's the problem that Ukraine supplies a lot of agricultural cultures to the global markets, both classical wheat, corn and barley, but as well rape seeds and sunflower oil, sunflower seeds, soya beans. So that's why this is a really complex problem for global agriculture. I think that this is a high time to discuss this problem in great detail. So thank you for this opportunity to discuss it, and I am open for your questions and remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kachaka, for your very comprehensive description of the situation. I think it is very important to bear in mind that in the end of the chain, there are small farmers that are struggling in war conditions to make a living. And I think that all of us, we have to bear this in mind, the institutions, but the citizens as well. We have to bear in mind what it means to support Ukraine farmers in this situation. Thank you as well for your concern and your remarks regarding South Asia. The situation in Sri Lanka, as you rightly said, I mean, the crisis is caused by internal factors in Sri Lanka. There are very acute problems in countries like Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, and Pakistan that are domestic originated, but this global situation will certainly contribute negatively to its resolution. And it is very, very encouraging to see that you do not lose this issue from sight, that Ukrainian authorities, in spite of the daunting situation you are facing, you are thinking on the people all over the world, and that's really very encouraging. And now we will move back to Europe, back to Brussels. We were expecting Mr. Michael Scannell, Deputy Director General of the DG AGRI. Unfortunately, for a problem of health, he will not be able to come, but we were very fortunate to count with Mr. Koen Dillen, who is the head of unit for arable crops, and he was very ready to replace him, and we are very thankful for him to take to join us. And he will, out of Brussels, he will say he will present a perspective of the European Commission authorities. Please, Mr. Dillen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning. And indeed, sorry again, and apologies again for the change in speakers, but Mr. Scannell could not make it today. I listened carefully to the speakers before me, and I would like to, from my side, use my 10 minutes to summarize a little bit what we have done as a Commission, but also look forward to the importance of the work ahead of us, and that will touch a lot upon of what we have heard so far. Because this week, Ukraine will enter into the 6th month of war, and unfortunately, we see that Russia is actually waging 2 wars. It's waging the real war against the Ukrainian people, but they're also engaging in a war of words and rhetoric, a propaganda war that tries to put the blame of global food security on the Western sanctions. And this comes at a time when Russia is bombing, as we heard, Ukrainian fields and storages, destroying and looting wheat, and the Russian Navy is blocking export routes to the Black Sea. So through our engagement at the international level, we are therefore very clear with third countries that it's not the EU or our sanctions to be blamed for the declining food security and rising food prices. The blame lies with Russia. And therefore, the EU has been with Ukraine from day one, supporting countries' heroic stand-up to the aggressor. And that's why I would like to summarize some of the important actions that we have taken and some of the elements that we want to do going forward. First of all, we are doing our utmost to help Ukrainian efforts to continue with food production. This is important for the Ukrainian farmers in order to continue receiving income for their work. They were risking their lives by attending the fields and working despite the threat of Russian shelling and bombing. We want Ukraine to maintain its position on the world markets, knowing how big a player it is and how important it is in the exports of grains and oilseeds for Europe, but also for the world. That's why we stand with the farmers. We have had a very tight relationship with Minister Solskjaer and his predecessor, who are regularly updating us on the needs in terms of agricultural inputs and what we can do for the agricultural sector. Just this weekend, we received a new letter focusing on the need in the horticulture and the wine sector, to which we're looking carefully. We have also mobilized the private sector and member states to cooperate through the Union's civil protection mechanism for in-kind donations to the Ukrainian farmers. There have been a number of initiatives as well, together with other players, to help farmers. The Commission has worked with the FAO to purchase vegetable seeds, for instance, or has helped Bayer to donate maize seeds to sow about 30,000 hectares of maize. Additionally, from the EU side, on the 1st of July, the Commission approved a Ukraine budget support facility of around 500 million euros. That includes 50 million to support those small-sized farmers in Ukraine that need support at this moment, as we also heard from speakers before. And this will be a direct grant to the farmers based on either per livestock or per hectare unit. And that should also help the farmers to continue producing food for Ukraine and for the world. But besides helping farmers, we also want to preserve the export capacity of the Ukrainian agri-food sector to do their job on the global market. Therefore, in response to the request by Mr. President Zelensky, the Union has granted Ukrainian products temporary 1-year duty-free and quota-free access to the EU market. The measure aims to facilitate those Ukrainian exports to boost the Ukrainian economy, which is severely weakened by the Russian military aggression. The measure will also serve to increase export revenue for Ukraine by allowing it to export to the EU without tariffs. I think that's important. But secondly, let me turn to the European Ukraine solidarity lanes and the efforts that are happening to unblock the export of grains in particular from Ukraine. My colleague from DG Move, Mr. Schmidt, will develop much more on that, I'm sure, but I would like to focus on the agricultural aspects here from the solidarity lanes. The Commission has worked intensively over the past 2 months to assist Ukraine in establishing alternative logistic routes for the agricultural goods. By road, rail, inland waterways, all options have been explored. And this was driven, of course, by the blockade of the export routes to the Black Sea port. We are now all following with interest the United Nations efforts to find a diplomatic solution to reopen the Black Sea ports, because that's important. But nevertheless, we should not lose the momentum on the solidarity lanes. They will continue to be important, not only for transporting the remaining tons of Ukrainian grain now short term, but we consider that they're generally establishing new logistical routes between the EU and the Ukraine in support of our strengthened bilateral relationship. And indeed, with autumn approaching and harvest ongoing, we're entering a crucial period. The new Ukrainian harvest is coming up, but there's still grains trapped in the Ukraine with little wheat leaving the country. And this raises a number of issues. Immediate problems relate to the storage of grains and their export to third countries, which would in turn bring much needed income to Ukrainian farmers, as said before, and ensure global food security. It also raises questions, these logistical problems, to the future of Ukrainian food production again. Will farmers continue sowing if they know that they can not export the grain? We could be faced with a longer-term challenge if Ukraine is effectively unable to trade on the world markets. What we're looking at is not just this summer's harvest, but probably even more important, what will happen in the sowing and the next harvest. But indeed, in the meantime, the solidarity lanes are delivering, and we already heard some numbers before. The quantity of grains exported has increased significantly in June to 1.4 million, and the total export of agricultural products reached 2.5 million tons last month. And indeed, with some additional efforts, we think we could reach 3 million tons of agricultural products per month from Ukraine. It cannot match the capacity of the Ukrainian Black Sea ports, of course, but the progress is nevertheless impressive. We are also well aware of the impact of this situation and the increased exports on the neighboring markets in the EU, because of course, also the European harvest is coming on track, and we use the same logistical and storage capacity. And we have to make sure that the grain does not get trapped in these markets, and that we keep on working and monitoring the situation to make sure that the grains reach the places where they are needed. That will be important work for us. But also, the EU also has a responsibility, as was said before, to be actually an important player on the world market through our own EU food production and in particular wheat production. Therefore, all eyes are on our own cereal harvest, in particular wheat. As a big net exporter of wheat, the EU production of cereals does contribute to global food security. For the moment, our common wheat forecast production stands at 125 million tons, which would allow to export 38 million tons of wheat on the global markets. This is our contribution to covering the production gap to address the expected global shortage in wheat following the Russian invasion in Ukraine. Because as said before, we have to make sure that there's a diversity of sources for food on the global market. So for us, we are now in a defining moment when it comes to global food security. We barely recovered from the COVID-19 pandemic when Russia started the atrocious invasion in Ukraine. The expectation is on us in the EU to lead the world response, to show solidarity with Ukraine and with countries affected by the damaging consequences of Putin's war. And we are doing this. We are working very closely with member states through the Team Europe approach. We're working closely with the United Nations, WTO, and the G7 presidency to make sure that global food security is preserved. Unity and support are the strongest messages we can send in the face of Russian aggression and Russian disinformation. This sets out a little bit what we have done so far, what we want to bring in the coming months, and I hope that we can have an interesting discussion on these elements. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dillen, and let me congratulate DG AGRI for all you have been doing in favor of Ukraine farming and actually in favor of the whole of the free world. This is really remarkable. As you really pointed out, we are in face as well of a war of information. The Russian disinformation has been very strong, implying that there has been any sort of sanctions on Russian food exports, which is not true, as has been repeated by the European Commission, and actually trying to hide the real sanctions that are really hurting the military machine, namely the technological sanctions that are really working. Of course, Russia is not speaking about them. So the information war is very important. And in this information war, it is very, very important, in my perspective, to combat the attempt to create panic. I think that the European Commission has the capacity to ensure mechanisms to prevent panic even across the world, and it should use them, and it should send a message of firmness and of reassuring its commitment to the welfare of the whole world and to the food security of the whole world. Well, thank you very much for your contribution. And now, as the last speaker in the morning, we will have the Deputy Director General at DG Move, Mr. Kristian Schmidt. He will end the panel. During this last intervention, you are very much welcome to present questions in writing that you want to be answered, or prepare already any question you want to present orally during the debate in the question and answers period that will follow. Right now, so I will give the floor to Mr. Schmidt. Thank you very much for coming and for your presence. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Paolo, and thank you to the South Asian Democratic Forum for organizing this event. I greet the ministers of Ukraine, and let me, in my remarks, make 4 points. First of all, Ukraine is doing everything it can to address this threat to the global food security. Let us take us back to February, March, when we first were assessing the impact of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. And I remember my department and colleagues reaching out to interlocutors in Kyiv and asking, what about your exports? A country that is in the middle of war, the capital under threat. humanitarian issues, refugee flows. And the message from Kiev was very clear. We will still want to export to the world markets. Even when our farmers are out there farming with mines and ammunition left behind in the fields, we still want to sow our fields. We still want to honor our commitment and our contracts to buyers across the world. And ever since, even with Ukrainian railways being bombarded, railway stations, civilian targets, these logistical networks inside Ukraine are kept functional in order to uphold that obligation. Also because, of course, these export revenues are important for Ukraine to remain capable of funding its efforts. So my first point here is that from the very first moment, Ukraine has clearly honored its responsibility as a major food exporter to the world. The second point I want to make is on EU sanctions, because the Russian narrative, of course, as we have heard from previous speakers, is trying to put the blame of the rising food prices across the world on EU sanctions. And I want to be very clear. Many of these sanctions are drawn up in my department, so I know a little bit about what they do. These transport sanctions, they are not in any way stopping Russian exports to the rest of the world. They are not stopping Ukrainian exports to the rest of the world. We have closed the EU's territory to Russian transport operators. We have closed the EU airspace to Russian airlines. Trucks from Russia cannot go into Europe, but not a single kilo of grain was ever exported in any of these transport modes or ways. The exports from Ukraine, as you have just heard, have never gone through EU territory to the rest of the world. From Russia, they have never gone through EU territory and EU ports to the rest of the world. And therefore, these sanctions have absolutely no impact on the problems we are now seeing. On the contrary, of course, the Russian closure of the Black Sea ports of Ukraine, that has a major impact on the crisis that we now see. Furthermore, EU sanctions are proposed by the Commission, decided by the Council, implemented by the Member States. They are not extraterritorial. So our sanctions does not have a say on whether a country in Africa or in Southeast Asia is allowed, yes or no, to buy grain from Russia. Our sanctions do not say that. Our sanctions apply on EU territory, and of course it applies on banks that are complicit in crimes against humanity in Ukraine, but they do not apply extraterritorially on any of third countries in the world. So point number 2, EU sanctions are not a factor in the problems we now see. Point number 3, on solidarity lanes. It is clear that you cannot over land replace the traditional transport gone by sea and maritime connections. Let me show you the map of the solidarity lanes that we are working on. This will be published later this week. What it clearly shows is that everything is being done by Ukraine and by the European Union to get as much grain from Ukraine to the ports either in Romania or in Poland or the Adriatic. So from there they may reach their clients in Africa or in Asia. It's also clear, of course, that in terms of prices, going over land by rail or by truck is increasing the price. Those logistic links over land are simply more difficult and therefore more costly and time consuming than via the sea. So this drives up the logistical costs of Ukraine's exports, and therefore it may not be a problem of quantities, of volumes, of availability, but of affordability that many food dependent countries will see rising prices on the global markets. But I want to be absolutely clear, Paolo, with these solidarity lanes, every ton counts, and both on the Ukrainian side and on the EU side, we are doing everything to bring down those costs so that these exports can reach the global markets. Let me give you a few examples. EU member states have lifted tolls on motorways for road transports. We have signed transport agreements with Ukraine and with Moldova, by the way, to give unlimited access to Ukrainian haulers and transport operators transporting these goods across EU territory. We have given full flexibility to the European railways in terms of safety standards, etc., so that wagons that cross the borders can go to the ports. We have activated and are trying to boost capacity in some of our ports, Constanța in Romania. We are dredging the Danube. 50% of exports are now going by river. We are buying barges. We have established matchmaking platforms in order for Ukrainians exporters to connect with buyers in the rest of the world. And we are looking at the long-term geopolitical change in terms of Ukraine's new transport corridors via the so-called TEN-T network, the Trans-European network. So short-term, long-term, everything that can be done to get this grain to the world market is being done. And fourth point, and let me conclude with that, we share the concern of our Southeast Asian partners and our African partners, by the way, of this crisis. So what can these countries do? Well, first of all, they can join everybody else in asking for Russia to stop its aggression. The UN General Assembly is coming up. I note that in the last resolution on the war in Ukraine, many countries who are deeply food dependent abstained in these votes. So first message to Moscow should be stop the aggression, with a clear united stand on that from the whole world. And of course, it should not be necessary to say so, but also a call from a united world for Russia to stop targeting civilian infrastructure. There are bombs falling on storage facilities, on railway stations, on things that are of key importance, and of course the blockage. Support, thirdly, the UN efforts to open up the Black Sea ports. So here, we really would expect from our partners to support the Secretary General in ensuring, which is what is a sort of a humanitarian, but also absolutely crucial corridor. And finally, I join Minister Kachaka in calling this a sort of new colonialism from Russia, because we have seen Russia instrumentalizing or weaponizing a number of dependencies. Europe has it with energy, and Russia has weaponized gas for geopolitical purposes. Russia has weaponized migration flows from Syria into Russia, into Europe, cyber threats, and now we are seeing Russia's role as a food exporter being weaponized, not just towards Southeast Asia, but the whole world. And it just demonstrates Russia as an unreliable partner on all these various areas. And therefore, we need to build together resilience so that these dependencies do not lead into any country in the world being dependent on such an unreliable partner. I'll stop there, but I join the previous speakers in saying very clearly we take this very seriously. And while the blame lies entirely in Moscow for the situation in which we find ourselves, we are all here working very hard to try to minimize the impact, to support our partners in Africa and Southeast Asia to build up their food security. And there is no one here from our Department for International Development Cooperation, but they are certainly working with all third countries across the world to improve their local agricultural production in order not to be dependent on these unreliable partners in Russia. With that, Paolo, thank you very much for hosting us, and back to you. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Kristian Schmidt. You really made a very comprehensive approach to the issue. The war is also here. I certainly subscribe to your proposal. One way to get the situation corrected is to press everybody, to press Russia to stop immediately the aggression, to come back to its international borders, and to allow the Ukrainian people to live peacefully. I certainly think this is the most important message that we must all share here in this forum. And now I have to apologize, but there was some problem of communication. And actually, we had the confirmation from the European External Action Service on the presence in the conference, but we didn't see it. I'm very sorry. I apologize to the European External Action Service, but fortunately, we have here Mr. Lukas Streiff. He is coming from the office of the Deputy Secretary General of the EAS, and I think he is prepared to give us some words in the conference, although we were not able to answer him since we for some reason we lost his message. Sorry for this, and thank you so much for your flexibility and for your availability to join us. Please, Mr. Streiff, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and no need to apologize. It's just a miscommunication, like you said. Deputy Secretary General Helena König sends her regards, and I don't intend to make a contribution on her behalf, but just two little additions to what has been said. I think it's been very comprehensive already, and my colleagues from the European Commission, Director Schmidt and Koen Dillen, have already outlined a lot of what the EU is doing. I think as the External Action Service, what really is important for us to underline to all our partners in Ukraine and around the world is that this is a top priority and has been for months. On the international scale, it really is one of the hottest topics right now, where our approach to global partnerships is being tested. And we need to achieve at the same time full support to Ukraine in this extreme situation under aggression from Russia. And secondly, make sure that our international partnerships around the world are strengthened in this period and not strained. And this is at times a difficult one. The HRVP, the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign and Security Affairs, is currently speaking in New York at an event that the US is convening, a call to action it's called, on food security as well, and has been very active on this measure together with the European Commission. I think two quick additions to what has been said. The first on sanctions. Indeed, like my colleagues mentioned, we have to hammer home the message very clearly that this is Russia disinforming partners around the world, trying to share responsibility with others, or trying to shift its responsibility to others for causing this food crisis spike. We need to answer that clearly. We need to inform colleagues of what the sanctions are and what they are not. But we have to be careful, I think, not to do Russia's bidding by keeping the narrative about sanctions. It is not the centerpiece of the issue. And while we need to correct this misunderstanding and this disinformation, we need to make very sure that the conversation does not stop there, but that we instead very clearly underline Russian responsibility for the food crisis for as long as this war continues. And secondly, we talk about what we're actually doing. And that is the second point that I would like to add in order to, let's say, add a framework in which all of the EU action that my colleagues have already outlined is operating in. The heads of state and government of the EU and their council in May came together around what we call a Team Europe Global Food Security Response. This is basically the idea that all of the European Union's institutions plus the member states are trying to do actions along the same strands of action, and we have 4 of them outlined. The first one is about solidarity, and this of course means humanitarian assistance that is being ramped up right as we speak and has been since the 24th of February. It is of course key because it's the most short-term assistance. We don't only mean eco humanitarian assistance, but we also mean food affordability support and in fact even looking at measures such as special drawing rights because soon this crisis will turn from food to other issues such as macroeconomic stability and countries literally running out of funds to import. So that extends to solidarity. The second plane of action that we are pursuing as the EU is production. This has been mentioned just now as well. Our colleagues in the Commission and the Directorate Generals INPA and NIR are looking at all the programs we are doing with partners around the world that strengthen agriculture, that make the systems of food more sustainable in our development cooperation. The third is trade. And on trade, what we see is, on one hand, the priority of getting Ukrainian grades onto global markets through the solidarity lanes that we have been discussing in this meeting. But the second aspect of trade is, of course, that we need to call all international partners to refrain from trade restrictions. Because we saw every time a country announces its further trade restrictions, prices go up again. And we need to make sure that every partner around the world pulls along on keeping agricultural trade as free as possible during this time. And the fourth and last strand of action of the EU global food security response is what we call our commitment to multilateralism. And that is to say that we will embed all of our response on food security as the EU in the multilateral system. We will contribute to the UN's work in the Global Crisis Response Group. We are going to align ourselves very nicely with what the G7 and other formats, such as the US Call to Action event today in New York, are trying to put together, so that the world is really as united as possible as it tries to support Ukraine, but also make sure that partners around the world feel that we see their needs and that we are helping concretely. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Streiff. And I think that your words were really precious, because I have to confess, I did not know about this global food security initiative, but this is exactly what I think is needed. We need to combat panic. Panic is one of the most important instruments of the Russian aggression. Actually, I did write a small comment on this. This is how the whole of the issue started, called the Russian humbug, which is an article written by Karl Marx on the Crimean War in 1853, that exactly describes this logic, this Russian logic, and it didn't change much, unfortunately. And I'm very, very satisfied to see that the European authorities, they are getting to it. They want to combat the panic. And this is exactly what we need, with measures like that take the whole of the perspective, the sustainability of the food chain, the macroeconomic issue, the solidarity. I think you are absolutely brilliant. I'm so sorry we missed your inscription, but you did a wonderful presentation, and we are very thankful to it. We have already, I am trying to get on this. We have the priority that is from Al Haram newspaper from Cairo, from Egypt, looking very much on the Egyptian issue. Let me just tell you that when a parliamentarian, European parliamentarian, many years ago, one of the things that impressed me the most was exactly the public distribution of bread in Cairo. I saw it, in 2007, and now it is important for the life of so many people. The whole of the cereal imports in a country like Egypt, an enormous country like Egypt. So it's something that touches me very much. But anyway, the question is directed to Mr. Dmytrasevych. I don't know if you are still. Yeah, I think that you are there. And the question is the following: Egypt is a big country importing grains from Ukraine. Is there any present cooperation with the Egyptian government in regard to increasing amount of grains exports to Egypt? So I don't know if Mr. Dmytrasevych, if you can answer it, or if I don't know if somebody else from the Ukrainian side is in the capacity to answer, but I would pass you the floor in the first place.
I can see the numbers of exports of grains to Egypt. For example, if we had about 26,000 tons in June, so at the moment in July we increased this number to 50,000 tons. So the numbers are increasing with increasing of our export capacity.
Thank you very much.
Let me add as well, so that
yeah,
for this cooperation with Egypt, I think that first that we have a direct government-to-government dialogue with Egypt, but at the same time the situation, so that war changed the way how we cooperate. So Ukraine was one of key players in supplies of wheat to government, to GASK, so that the Egyptian governmental purchases, and we have a lot of Ukrainian companies, including the one of biggest Ukrainian trader and producer Nibulon, participated in these tenders and suppliers. So that's why. But the war, in reality, destroyed the Egyptian approach to government procurement. So now they are looking for any type of purchases, so anywhere. So that's why when we are able to aggregate the shipments that can be delivered to Egypt, so in Constanza, then we started export, and this interest to continuous supplies to the public stocks of Egypt is still strong among companies, and this interest is only limited to with possibility to aggregate big shipments in vessels in Constanza for the moment, or in the north in Baltic seaports. So this is like additional to what happens with Egypt. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kachaka. I hope that everyone was hearing. We have here the most important responsible from the European side as well. I think Egypt might be perhaps one of the most important countries that is dependent on cereal imports, and the situation is certainly very important. And I hope that everything can be done to answer any issue that might be raised regarding food security in Egypt. I don't have here other questions right now. I don't know if we could, if any of you want to clarify issues or want to go more in depth into one of the questions. For instance, this Egyptian issue that is also felt in other countries, but perhaps not so strongly as in Egypt. I don't know if any European responsible wants to give an opinion on the issue. Yeah, perhaps could I suggest, Mr. Streiff? I don't know if you have any idea of how this initiative, for instance, could play for a country like Egypt, that is actually perhaps one of the biggest importers in the world of cereals.
Yeah, concretely on Egypt, I don't have the exact information of what is the latest conversation with Egyptian counterparts, but the way this works is, of course, that ECHO, which is the EU's humanitarian assistance mechanism, would be in contact with, for example, the UN system on the ground in order to strengthen social resilience through food distribution in Egypt. And making sure that programs that make sure that food security is guaranteed for the most vulnerable populations in Egypt are well funded. There has been a top-up of resources for this purpose globally, and Egypt, as you said, is one of the most important countries. So this is on the solidarity pillar, the most important one. Production, we have with DG NEAR, the part of the commission that works with Egypt, gone through program by program what are systems, food security system programs, so let's say projects in development cooperation that touch on food security, and how can we top them up, and how can we bring them forward? How can we do actions that were foreseen for later quicker? And in terms of trade, it is working exactly with Egypt and its trade partners on making sure that trade flows are working as freely as possible despite the disruptions. And some speaker of our circle here in the beginning of the session already said that it is become quite clear that the, let's say, dependence of some individual countries on some individual exporters is a real sign of a lack of resilience that needs to change in the future. So diversification of trade flows is one of the key aspects that we will be working with our partners on. But really the main thing that we're doing also is to just show that we are close to our partners and that we are listening to their needs, because this is the kind of moment when we as the EU either prove ourselves as the go-to partner for countries such as Egypt, or we let them down. And that is why I think it is so important that we use every opportunity to speak not only about the direct consequences of the war, but also the indirect ones and everything we can do about it. And if I may just add one last thought, which I find important. You might have seen or heard that, for example, the High Representative of the EU for Foreign Affairs wrote to all of the foreign ministers of Africa a letter in which he underlined Russian responsibility for the food insecurity, but he also offered to listen very concretely in case there are examples where sanctions do seem to be a hurdle to imports, and that the EU would want very concrete information in order to check what is actually the problem here, and is there something we can do to facilitate a solution. And to date, we have not received a single case that has been raised with concrete information about how sanctions actually stop imports or make them difficult. So on the very concrete level, there is no indication that there really are such problems, and our partners are still appreciating, though, that we are signaling willingness to listen to them in case there are such things. But so far, there isn't. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your clarification. I already disseminated among the participants the link to the global initiative that you sent to me, and I'm very thankful for you to have sent it to me. What you just said is absolutely vital. I think that it should be, I think the press should be the first to cooperate in this instance. It should be clear to everyone in the world that there is a will from the European institutions to listen to any critical situation and to answer it as soon as and as best as possible. This is a very important movement from the European institutions, and I'm really, I think that you really deserve all the congratulations for taking it. Well, I don't know if my colleague and the co-organizers, Mr. Tereshko, Sherhii, if he wants to say something on the issue of how Ukraine sees this initiative, this global initiative for food security. How do you think it could improve the situation, and how it could also help Ukraine in facing the challenges it is facing for the export of its products? I don't know if you want to say something about that.
Thank you for interesting discussion, Paolo. Just to say very simply, as was already mentioned many times here by almost all speakers, Russia exploiting not only food as a instrument of its warfare globally, but also information related to the food instability. And that is why we very warmly welcome such initiative of the European Union to strengthen the communication instruments between Europe and including Ukraine as a key player and affected region in Africa or Asia. That is why we do encourage the countries of the region of the regions in Africa and Asia to communicate their challenges, to make European Union, Ukraine more aware about their challenges, their problems, to address the issue directly towards European Union, and it would be much better way to solve the problem, to at least to look for opportunities to solve the problem, individual problem in each of the affected countries, rather than going into the trap of the Russian blackmailings and disinformation. So just warm, strong encouragement to the region to use the established and suggested opportunity by the Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tereshko. I think this is one of the most important outcomes of our meeting, is exactly the existence of this online facility that I think we have to publicize as much as we can in our capacity. I don't know if any of you want to use the floor to highlight any issue that has not been sufficiently highlighted. Oh yes, Mr. Dmytrasevych, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Paulo. The 2 points I want to emphasize. First one, the reason we are now talking about global food crisis is the war started from Russia. So the best way to solve the problem is to defeat Russian army in Ukraine and to deblock our Black Sea ports. That's the first point. The second point I want to emphasize and to highlight that these negotiations about deblocking seaports, we don't see the results at the moment, and we don't have to rely on these results of this deblocking. We have to keep working to improve our export capacity in the direction of Ukrainian western borders to Europe. So I just appeal to keep working on that, keep supporting Ukraine politically, financially, and with communications with the European Commission and our other partners. And at the end, I want once again to thank for the support, thank for good cooperation with European Commissions, and to thank you for organizing this meeting today.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. The very first conclusion, as you rightly said, is to say to Mr. Putin, withdraw immediately your occupying forces from the Ukrainian side. This is the most important conclusion, the most important call that we have to share among all of us, because this is the reason of all of the problem, and this is the solution to immediate solution to all of the issues that we are facing. Absolutely, I could not be more in agreement with you. Secondly, we should not be, as you rightly mentioned, I think we really have to stress this point. It is very good to see a lot of initiatives and United Nations and agreements to allow for the freedom of operation of ports. Everything is fantastic, but we should not be let ourselves be trapped on promises and on future agreements and things that ultimately will depend on the goodwill of the invaders. Never. This is not what we should do. We should work in our capacity. These solidarity lanes are fundamental. This global initiative is fundamental. we have to do whatever it takes to help the Ukrainian farmers, because helping Ukrainian farmers is to help those countries that are feeling more threatened from a food crisis. This is, both of the things go along one with the other, and both of the things will work magnificently the day that the Russian invading forces will withdraw. Without that's no doubt. The second best solution is till the moment that they are convinced that they have to withdraw, to sustain this movement of solidarity with the Ukrainian farmers and with the people that are dependent on import of foodstuff, cereals, and oilseeds, and other important food raw materials. Well, certainly this global initiative from the European institutions, I think it's really absolutely what we needed. We need an active position from the European institutions. We need to answer on all fronts, looking at everything from the sustainability, environmental sustainability as well, of course, goes without saying, solidarity, production, everything has to be taken on board. This initiative of having an open line to existing problems is absolutely brilliant. It's really what we most needed. So these are three very important points. Our Ukrainian friends, they already informed us that you will be making a big conference in September on this issue. I hope all the best for this conference. I hope that your voice is heard, that solidarity is coming, that the practical steps you are needing right now will be given by all of us at the institutional level, by companies. I think that the responsibility, the business responsibility, is also very important. Business should not be eyeing the situation as an opportunity for extra profits. Unfortunately, I think this is exactly what is happening from a lot of big players. They should not be doing it. And us, I mean, the citizens, the public opinion, the institutions should have an eye on them for not allowing this business to have this sort of position. They should not have it. They should be on the solution part of the equation, not on the problem part of the equation. We have to make a very strong appeal to business for their responsibility, for their social responsibility, and ultimately it is for all of us citizens, those who praise freedom, those who praise human life, the sanctity of the human life, that cannot tolerate this aggression, that really are thinking every morning on our dear Ukrainian friends that are sustaining this horrendous war. We have to continue. We have to show our solidarity and to do it in an intelligent way. So this is what I would like to say to all of you. Thank you so much for your participation. I don't know if somebody else wants to use the floor. Otherwise, I would like to thank the Ukrainian mission to the European Union, the Ukrainian government, the European Commission, the European External Action Service, the Halaram for that also participated, The question was very, very important, I think. And to all of those that have been working for this event, our associate Albino that is over there in the back, and of course these two wonderful ladies, Anastasia and Vitalina, that have been from the Ukrainian Mission, working for making this a success that I think it was. Thank you all, and hopefully we will see solutions coming up, and we will see a free, independent, and peaceful Ukraine as soon as possible. Thank you so much for your presence, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Slava Ukraini.
Thank you. Bye.